Imagine walking into your hometown to find every single person gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just silence. On November 12, 1930, in the frozen wilderness of northern Canada, this nightmare became reality when an entire Inuit village simply vanished from the shores of Anjikuni Lake, leaving behind a mystery that still haunts investigators nearly a century later. Picture the most remote place you can imagine, then go 1,000 miles further north. That's where Anjikuni Lake sits in what's now Nunavut, Canada's Arctic territory. This isn't just remote, it's one of the most desolate regions on Earth, with more than 20 square miles of barren rock and ice for every single person. The Inuit called this area the Barren Grounds, and for good reason. For generations, small Inuit communities dotted these frozen shores, surviving through fishing, hunting caribou, and trading with the occasional fur trapper brave enough to venture into this hostile landscape. These weren't temporary camps. These were established communities where families had lived for years, connected by ancient trade routes that stretched across the Arctic like frozen highways. But unlike other mysteries you've heard about, Anjikuni isn't just another people disappeared story. What makes this case truly chilling is what was left behind, what was taken, and most disturbing of all, what was dug up. Joe LaBelle had been working these northern territories for years. As a fur trapper, he knew the rhythms of Arctic life, when villages would be bustling with activity, when the smoke should be rising from chimneys, when children should be playing outside despite the bitter cold. November 12, 1930 was supposed to be just another stop at a friendly Inuit settlement he'd visited many times before. Instead, LaBelle found something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The village appeared normal from a distance. Kayaks were pulled up on the frozen shoreline, tents and dwellings stood intact against the wind, but as LaBelle called out his usual greetings, the silence that answered back was deafening. Not the comfortable quiet of a sleeping village, but something far more sinister, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Moving through the settlement, LaBelle discovered a scene that defied logic. Half-finished meals sat frozen over cold fire pits as if families had simply stood up mid-bite and walked away. Sewing lay abandoned, with needles still threaded through caribou hide shirts. The work stopped so abruptly that the needle remained exactly where it had been placed. Personal belongings, rifles, clothing, tools essential for survival in the Arctic, all left behind as if they meant nothing. But it was what LaBelle found next that transformed this from strange to terrifying. 7 sled dogs, still tied to their posts, had starved to death. For the Inuit, these weren't just pets, they were lifelines, the difference between survival and death in the Arctic. No Inuit family would ever abandon their dogs. It would be like a farmer abandoning his horses or a sailor abandoning his compass. It simply didn't happen. Then, at the edge of the village, LaBelle made his most disturbing discovery. A grave had been freshly dug up. The traditional stone circle around the burial site remained undisturbed, meaning this wasn't the work of scavenging animals. Human hands had carefully opened this grave and removed whatever or whoever had been buried there. LaBelle's report to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police triggered one of the most baffling investigations in Canadian history. When RCMP officers arrived at the scene, they confirmed every detail of LaBelle's account. 25 people, men, women, and children, had vanished without leaving a single footprint in the snow leading away from the village. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. During their investigation, the RCMP officers reported seeing something in the Arctic sky that they'd never encountered in all their years patrolling the Northern Territories. These weren't the familiar green and blue curtains of the aurora borealis that dance across northern Canada's winter nights. Instead, they described pulsing blue lights that seemed to hover and move with purpose across the horizon. The investigation officially concluded that the villagers had been missing for approximately 8 weeks before LaBelle's arrival. 8 weeks of Arctic winter, and yet no trace of 25 people was ever found. No bodies recovered, no signs of where they went, nothing. So what happened at Anjikuni Lake? The theories range from the plausible to the truly bizarre, and each one raises more questions than it answers. The most conventional explanation suggests government relocation. In the 1930s, Canadian authorities were indeed relocating indigenous communities, sometimes forcibly. But this theory crumbles under scrutiny. Government relocations were documented affairs, with paperwork, transportation records, and witness accounts. The Anjikuni disappearance left no bureaucratic trail whatsoever. Plus, why would officials allow valuable supplies and essential survival gear to be abandoned? And what government agency digs up graves? Some researchers point to natural disasters. Maybe the village fled from an approaching blizzard or Arctic storm. But experienced Inuit communities were masters of weather prediction, capable of reading Arctic conditions that would leave modern meteorologists baffled. They wouldn't abandon everything for weather they'd survived countless times before. More importantly, if they'd fled together, where were the tracks? Where were the bodies when the storm passed? Environmental catastrophe offers another angle. Could toxic gases from underground permafrost or perhaps contaminated water sources have forced a mass evacuation? It's possible, but again, this doesn't explain the total absence of any trail leading away from the village or why search parties found no evidence of the villagers anywhere in the surrounding territory. Now, here's where things get really interesting for American audiences. The parallels to our own frontier mysteries. Think about Roanoke Colony, where 115 English colonists vanished from what's now North Carolina in the 1580s, leaving only the word Croatoan carved into a tree. Or consider the more recent case of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers in Scotland, where 3 men disappeared from their post, leaving meals half-eaten and clocks stopped. Anjikuni fits into this disturbing pattern of mass disappearances that seem to defy every logical explanation. But there's something unique about the Arctic case that sets it apart from these other mysteries: the grave. Why would fleeing people take the time to dig up a burial? What was so important about those remains that it couldn't be left behind? In Inuit culture, disturbing the dead was considered deeply taboo, bringing terrible consequences to the entire community. Yet, someone or something had carefully exhumed that grave. This detail has led some researchers down a darker path, exploring the rich folklore of the Northern Territories. The Inuit have ancient stories about the Wendigo, cannibalistic creatures that roam the Arctic, consuming entire communities and leaving no trace behind. While most dismiss this as superstition, it's worth noting that Inuit oral traditions often preserve real historical events in mythological form. Could the Wendigo legends be cultural memories of actual disappearances, like Anjikuni? The mysterious blue lights reported by the RCMP have predictably attracted UFO theorists. By the 1970s, the Anjikuni case had become a cornerstone of alien abduction literature, with some accounts claiming that 3 trappers witnessed cylindrical objects flying toward the village before the disappearance. Betty Hill, famous for her own alien abduction claims, even alleged that she'd met a former RCMP officer who had spent 9 years investigating the case and concluded it was extraterrestrial. But here's what makes the Anjikuni mystery truly unsolvable. The evidence itself might be fiction. In the 1970s, researchers began digging deeper into the original sources, and what they found was disturbing. The newspaper article that first reported LaBelle's discovery, written by Emmett Kelleher for the Halifax Herald on November 29, 1930, may never have existed. When investigators searched newspaper archives, they found no trace of Kelleher or his article. The RCMP files that supposedly documented the investigation also missing. By 1988, RCMP historian C.W. Horrell was telling researchers that retired officers who had served in the area during 1930 remembered nothing about any mass disappearance. The official statement was devastating. No strange craft was ever reported. No one named Joe LaBelle ever came to the RCMP in panic about Lake Anjikuni. The RCMP did not send out any search parties. The story is entirely fictitious. So did the entire mystery spring from the imagination of a sensationalist writer? Was Joe LaBelle a fictional character? Was there ever really a village at Anjikuni Lake at all? This is where the mystery becomes truly maddening, because even if the original story was fabricated,